Good evening. It is such a pleasure to be with you. It's so wonderful to be spending a Friday night like this. My Friday nights are normally driving my own children to and from youth, not actually being at youth. So this is a big improvement on that. So thank you so much for having me. And I don't know if I did I put a picture of my kids up on that presentation? I can't remember. I did so many presentations. This is my family. Okay? Yes. These are my people. Those are my boys, Northwood boys. Northwood boys, good men, Northwood men. That's Blake and Ryan, they're in grade 8 at Northwood. And that is my daughter, Emily, an Ashton girl. Yeah, so we try and represent everyone. She has just moved to Ashton this year and living her absolute best life. So we are so happy. You know, there's one thing that makes parents happy, it's when their children are happy. So right now, everyone is happy in our house. And this evening, I get to spend a little bit of time with you guys to talk about a topic that is very, very complex, and we could literally spend hours and days talking about. And I am going to ask you, I know it's been a long school week. I spend probably about 10 to 15 hours at Northwood with the grade 9, so I've also been in school this week, and I know that more knowledge, more information is quite hectic on a Friday night, but I do feel with this topic of gender that most of the time decisions have been made around this based on how we feel. And God calls us to live from wisdom, which is based in understanding something, not feeling something. Things actually went wrong quite early in the Garden of Eden when Adam and Eve decided to base things on something other than truth. So we're going to actually look a little bit at some facts tonight, and then I'm going to share a couple of thoughts with you that I want you to give some thought to around what you believe about gender. And then at the end, I'm just going to give you a few handles on how to go from here. As we kick off, it's important for us to remember that you guys are living in one of the most complicated sexual and gender landscapes known to man. Your parents always tell you how hard their lives were, what it was like growing up. You know, I used to walk 2 kilometers in the snow, uphill both ways, to school and back. But I promise you, I honestly believe it's never been. Well, you guys don't have to go and work in mines and stuff like that, so that you've got that part better. But it's hard to be a teenager. It's very complicated, especially around gender and sexuality. And, it's only taken one generation to change from men and women to this complete spectrum of gender identities. It's happened so fast, it's left most parents' heads spinning, and a lot of us just wondering what to do about it. And you kind of are growing up in a culture where we're the only culture that's grown up without a moral absolute. So not something like it's true. And it's important that as we go into gender, that we understand where what we believe is based, right? Like, you need to know what you believe is based on. You know, we're standing on the ground, we believe in gravity, it's based on some kind of law of some kind. So gender is exactly the same. So I want to just talk quickly about the 2 different views of gender, because there's 2 main ones, and you're going to find yourself in one of these or somewhere in between tonight. If you can put that first slide up, please. This first view is called the dualistic worldview. This is a view where the body and the mind are 2 separate things. They're 2 different things. They are not the mind, the soul, in Christianese we'd call it the soul and the spirit, are housed inside the body. But they're 2 different things, okay? And the body carries around what we call the person. The real person lives inside. The body is just the vehicle to carry the person around. Does that make sense? So your mind, your body, your intellect, your feelings are the real you. That's where you reside. This part here, this is just a biological, expendable organism. In fact, this same theory is where abortion ideology exists. That an organism, an unborn child, is just matter. So therefore, ending a pregnancy is not killing a person because the person doesn't exist yet. It's where a bunch of what we believe, euthanasia, a whole bunch of stuff exists. So that's the one worldview. The second worldview is what we call an integrated worldview. And this is the one that's based in Scripture. So this is the worldview that we see in Genesis, where God created us, and He breathed life into us. And we see this over and over and over in Scripture. We see it in Genesis when God created us. But we also see it all the way through the Bible. I've just picked one verse from Psalm 84, verse 2, where it says, "With my whole being, body and soul, I will shout joyfully to the Lord." So in what we believe as Christians, our bodies, our souls, our spirits are deeply connected, and they are one thing. The outside me does not have more value than the inside me. The outside me is just as important in defining my identity as the inside me. Do you see why this is important? Because in gender ideology, it says the inside me gets to decide who I am, and if the outside me doesn't match that, I need to start changing the outside me to fit the real me. And so this belief that's rooted in Scripture says, no. The outside you is you. The inside you is you, but sometimes the inside you gets hurt and confused and doesn't match up with who you are. And sometimes that causes us pain, sometimes that causes us confusion, but it doesn't mean that the outside me is wrong, because I'm all me. It's one integrated person. And so when we talk about gender, we got to think, well, where do I find myself? What do I believe? Because when we look at the body, we're not just male and female based on our genitalia, our breasts. You know, these guys know I don't mind all of these words. I say them in Northwood all the time: penis, vagina, breasts. That's not what defines you as male and female. There's lots of other things. Males have longer thigh bones. They have larger foreheads. They have Adam's apples. They have bigger muscle mass. They have less fat. Unfair. Okay, unfair. But that is how they are. They when they go through puberty, even from when they're tiny little cells inside their mothers, they get this boost of testosterone. So they have testosterone in them from when they are microscopic. Okay? We as women have different things. We have different levels of hormones. We have more oxytocin in our bodies. So by comparison to men, we are more compassionate. We are more nurturing because of the hormones that are in us. If you had to take one of my cells and one of these guys' cells and put them under the microscope, you would know which one was a male, which one was a female. You would know. If you were dying in a hospital, if you changed your body completely to not look like your birth sex, the doctor would need to know, what are you biologically, so that I can give you the best medical treatment. So we are biologically male or female, and it's important that we realize that this has implications. Now, I've got a bunch of terminology that's going to come up now. I'm a bit of a nerd, okay? I love words and numbers and stuff, but I'm not going to bore you with all of this. But I do know that it's important to understand these words if you're going to have an educated opinion about gender. So we talk about sex, and sex used to be the same as gender. When you were born, before scans, and the doctor took you out of, your mom and went, it's a boy, it's a girl, that's your sex, okay? The state of being male or female. Now we call it birth sex, and my favorite, assigned sex. Like the doctor looks at you and goes, I'm going to assign this one boy, because he kind of looks like a boy. Like it's the doctor's decision that he's a boy, okay? But anyway, next one. The next one is gender. So this is now being separated. Gender and sex used to be the same thing, okay? But now they've been separated. Gender is how you feel, who you feel you are. Whether you feel male or feel female. The characteristics, the roles, that kind of thing. Okay, the next one. Gender identity refers to how you see yourself internally, regardless of what you look like on the outside. So someone could be biologically female, but have a male gender identity in gender ideology, based on who you feel you are and what gender you feel you are, okay? So next one, please. Gender dysphoria, this is the one that I want us to really understand because we have teenagers self-diagnosing with this all the time. You cannot go, I have gender dysphoria, unless a trained clinical psychologist has spent years with you understanding what you're struggling with. This is a real, very, very difficult psychological state to be in. It exists, and this is the feeling that your body and who you feel you are on the inside do not match up. And this usually presents from about the age of 4 or 5 and persists throughout someone's life. It doesn't happen in 3 months of being on some transgender forum on the internet. You then decide, I've got gender dysphoria. That's not what this is. And so when we see people self-diagnosing, you can imagine it's quite a dangerous thing because it's actually something that doctors need to do. The next thing is cisgender or gender conformity. You might have heard this. This is people who feel they're comfortable with their birth sex. You would describe, if you wanted to talk in gender terminology, you would describe me as cisgender. I'm a biological woman. I feel like a woman. I'm a mom. I'm a wife. I'm happy to be that. Okay? Next one, please. Transgender. So this is the opposite of cisgender. Those people who feel like their internal gender, who they feel they are, doesn't match up with their biological sex. Okay? The next one, please. Transitioning. This is a person who feels like they need to get the outside to match the inside. Okay? So this would be you change your pronouns. You change your hair. You change the way you dress. You then, if you are, let's go female to male, you would then, and we're seeing this, have a mastectomy, which means to cut off your breasts. You would then have a hysterectomy, take out your uterus and your ovaries, and then it would continue through the transition process to try and become the opposite gender. Now, I just want to stop here to say that this can never happen, which is the heartbreaking part of the transgender conversation, is a lot of people who go on this journey find that it's an ever disappearing horizon. If I can just do this, I'll feel okay. If I can just change this, I'll feel okay. Just one more thing and I'll feel okay. I was listening to Scott Nugent, he's this transgender guy. He's 42 years old. He was female, transitioned to male, had gender dysphoria for all of his life. And he's now an advocate against the medical transitioning of teenagers. Because he says, in all of his research, only 2% of people who transition their gender are satisfied with the change. 2%. And we are so quick to tell teenagers, if you feel like you're the opposite gender, just go for it. It'll make you feel better. And that, yeah, anyway, carry on. I don't want to jump around too much. Detransitioning. So because transitioning your gender can never actually work, we're seeing so much of this. But it's heartbreaking because I'm sure most of you have seen reels on Instagram or somewhere of these girls who's saying, why did the adults in my life not wake me up and tell me not to do this? I was 14 years old, I was a child, and you let me take off my breasts. It's craziness. Okay, so a lot of people are detransitioning. Next slide, please. Intersex. Don't get confused between intersex and transgender. The easiest way to describe this is, do you guys all know who Caster Semenya is? Okay, so Caster Semenya is an intersex person. It's a person who's born with both sets of reproductive organs in some way. Okay, it's a very complex, and a very small percentage of the world population is born like this. Okay, next. Sexual orientation. This is very different to gender. You can't confuse the two. This one YouTuber, I can't remember his name, he explained this the best I've ever heard. He says, gender is who you go to bed as. Sexual orientation is who you go to bed with. Does that make sense? One is an identity, another is a sexual attraction. They are different things. Okay, so next one please. That's my shoes. Okay, so we're done with that. All right, so that I just wanted to tell you that so that when I'm throwing these words around, you understand what I mean. So what is concerning is that in a very small space of time, a very large number of people have embraced gender transitioning. And so a lot of experts are going, what just happened? So we went from a tiny percentage. I just want to read one stat here. So one generation ago, less than 1 in 1,000 American teenagers went for gender surgery or questioned their gender. It's now 3 out of every 100. So we went from 1 in 10,000 to 3 out of 100. And if this continues, within the next 20 years, 25% of the world population will be transgender. It's a rapid thing. So then all the experts are going, what the heck happened? Like, how did this happen? And not only that, it happened in a very small group of people, a small demographic. So in my day, transgender people, majority were middle-aged men, cross-dressers, that weird guy who lived in my small town who used to walk down the road in a dress. That was what transgender people were. But there has been zero increase in that demographic. It stayed the same, exactly the same. Nothing's changed. So it's not about the world being more embracing or, it being a safer place to come out. That's not the reason. Because the demographic that's jumped has been preteen and teen upper middle class girls. One demographic has seen this huge jump. We see other ones. I'm sure, like you're going like Christy, I've seen boys on TikTok who are transitioning. I know that. But the huge jump has been teenage girls. And so why is that? So we don't have time to go into that, but there are a few reasons why these girls are the ones who are struggling with their identity. And a lot of the time it has nothing actually to do with gender. It's to do with being uncomfortable and feeling like their bodies are not what they want them to be. So can you just put that statistic up, please, if you can? So this is just, again, told you I'm a nerd. Teen suicide has increased by 25% in that time. Teens diagnosed with depression went up 35%. Self-harm amongst teenage girls, so that's hurting yourself, those kind of like anorexia, bulimia, self-harm, vaping, taking drugs, anything that harms your body, has gone up 62%, and self-harm amongst preteen girls has gone up 189%. So we have all of these girls feeling a lot of pain. And then our culture goes, well, the reason you're uncomfortable is because you're in the wrong body. Change your body and you'll feel better. And so a lot of teenage girls have kind of embraced this. And if you know anything about girls, we move in packs, okay? One goes to the toilet, we all go to the toilet. That boy hurts us, we all hate him. All of us. You are dead to us. Not dead to me, dead to us. Okay? And so this group of people, we are very, very prone to social contagion. And so a lot of girls who have transitioned or questions their gender have done it after someone in their group has done it. Or someone that they've been watching on TikTok has done it. And so that's one of the reasons there's been this massive jump. And then obviously, and I don't like to harp on about social media, but social media has played a massive role. So a girl who feels uncomfortable in her body, like most 12-year-olds do, 13-year-olds do, I don't know many 12 or 13-year-old girls who goes, look at my hot body. It is perfect. They're mostly like, oh, I feel so awkward, I look terrible in this. Then they go online and they search, why do I hate my body? One of the first results that'll pop up is, you might be trans. When I was a little bit younger than that, I was probably about 8, I used to be so indignant that boys could pee standing up. I felt that was unfair. Like, why? I was such a tomboy. I used to play. I grew up in Zim, so it was like we were always outside in the bush. And all the boys, if they needed a pee, they'd just stand up and pee. Like the girls, most of the time you're expected to go and find an actual toilet and at least go and find a bush to squat behind. And so I went through this phase where I used to carry a sunlight bottle around with me, sunlight liquid, washing up liquid. And I used to put it between my legs and I used to squeeze it. And I used to pretend that I was peeing. And I'd be like, this would be so cool. Was I trans? No, I wasn't trans. I was just going through a phase of feeling that life was unfair. And I could pee far with that thing. I really could, okay? But you know what? I got over it, and I moved on. But maybe if I'd had TikTok, I would have gone onto TikTok, and I would have gone, maybe it's because I'm a boy. There's a boy trapped in here, and I'm actually a boy. And I might have gone on a journey. Fortunately, I was in Zimbabwe, pre-internet, and nothing like that happened. And then a couple other things are also happening at the same time, is that because people are adopting these transgender ideologies as the compassionate thing, the inclusive thing, and I believe in compassion and inclusivity, please don't hear what I'm not saying, but it is having huge implications on the world. We often think, it's just kind. If someone's trans, if someone feels like they're a boy, let them transition. And yes, I agree, we need to each live our own lives. But what I do want you to give a little bit of thought to tonight is that what you believe impacts the world. Can you put that next slide up, please? Okay. Gender pronouns. Okay. There's a school in Cape Town who put these you could buy them and put them on your bag, on your blazer, so that people would know what to call you. Okay? Some of them are ones we know, and some of them are new ones, gender, non-binary, gender neutral. So we look at this and we go, oh, well, that's cool. And this school was like, well, this is a great idea, because then the transgender people will feel included. So even cisgender people would wear them to make people feel included. But then, if I went up to Zoe and I said to her, would you like a badge? And she said, no, thank you. The assumption would be, oh, transphobe, homophobe. Why? Don't you like trans people? What's wrong with you? And it caused so much division within the school. I've seen it happen at schools up here as well. So we think inclusivity, but it actually can cause division. And then Scott Nugent, this guy that I was telling you about, this transgender guy who's advocating that we definitely don't let teenagers transition in any way, he says to parents, if your children go to a school where they're allowed to change their pronoun, move them. And he's trans. So he's not a homophobe or a transphobe. He says that children are too young to understand what that means. Because he said, when you make that choice, he says, I'm 42, I know what that road looks like. When you start to transition, you cut your dating pool. You are going to have greater tendencies to commit suicide than the general population. You're going to cut your life expectancy by 12 years. You are never going to have children. You will probably be using a cane or a wheelchair by the time you are 60 because of what the hormones are going to do to your bones. You are going to have lung issues because of halting puberty. So when we say to a 12-year-old, yes, good idea, change your gender, he says that's bad adulting. And so he says what we do when we let children change their pronouns is we put them on a train track that's really hard for them to get off. And if we put that into Christian perspective and we understand the power of our words, he says, and we have completely secular studies in the Netherlands that say children who change their pronouns are much more likely to have sex change when they're adults, even those who regret it. Because our words carry life and death and power. And so when I call someone biologically she, he, him, that is speaking identity over a person. And so I do not recommend, and I say this as lovingly as possible, I do not recommend that you change your pronouns or that you use pronouns that do not fit your biological identity until, and this is, Scott Nugent says 21, I want to go 26 when your prefrontal cortex is fully grown. And this is where I land, and I've had to land somewhere in this conversation because I've taken a step out into this arena, is I won't use, if you are biologically a girl, until you're an adult, I will only use female pronouns to talk to you. Because I love you, and I care for this generation so much. When you're an adult, and you change your identity and you choose to transition to a different gender identity, I will call you what you want me to call you. Because you're an adult and you've made a choice and you've made a decision. But guys, we think these are just words. We think these are just badges. This is identity that we're speaking over each other. We have to really think about what identity we want to be speaking over one another. Okay, can you put the next slide up, please? All right, this is something we really have to think about as well when we think about gender. You may have seen this happen. It happened last year. Over there is a person who goes by the name of Leah Thomas, biological man, as you can see, transitioned to become a female and was allowed to swim in female college swim meets. As a male, Leah, Will, I don't know what to call her, Will, let's call him Will, was 475 in the country. That was his ranking as a swimmer. Did 3 years of testosterone suppressing, was allowed because of his low testosterone levels to compete as a woman, came first in the whole country. Because now, competing against women. And so, just because your testosterone is low enough, you can compete against as a woman. But look at his legs. Look at his shoulders. He's had testosterone flowing through his body since he was microscopic. That has built his body like that. And so thankfully, the NCAA, who controls swimming, and FINA, the World Swim Governing Body, revoked this medal and gave it to the girl who came second, that one in the middle there, and has made a ruling that in the Olympics, transgender athletes cannot swim against women. So some of these are happening, but if you're a surfer, you may have seen that the WSL has said that transgender women can compete as women. My daughter was furious. She even put something on the internet, which I told her to take off. Because she's a surfer. She says, Mom, that's not fair. I don't know if any of you have seen the world #1 at the moment. She's about this big. Think her name? Who's a surfer here? I want to say Macy Callahan, but I know that's wrong. Okay, so it has implications for sport. It has implications for fairness in sport when we say it doesn't matter what your gender is. Can you put the next slide up, please? Okay, thank you. I just want to say one thing before we go on to just encouraging you guys a little bit. And that is that we also think about the fact that what we believe impacts things like music. It impacts things like parenting. It impacts things like jails. So I don't know if some of you may know that Sam Smith has decided he's non-binary now. So the Brit Awards, which is the British version of the Grammys, didn't know what to do because now one of their best-selling artists can't be best male artist anymore. So now the Grammys and the Brits have decided no more gender categories, we're just going to have best artist, which seems like a great idea, fair, level playing field, until you remember, and I'm not a feminist, so I promise you I'm not a feminist, that women do not get as much support and backing and opportunity in the music industry as men do. It's just a fact. It's just a fact. And so when they went neutral, guess who took up all the spots in the top 5? Men. Where did that leave the women? Nothing. So it matters what we believe about these things because a whole demographic of people are now excluded because of that decision. We have a whole week of against gender-based violence. How do we protect women when women don't exist? Because they're not women. And then think about jails. We had a situation not so long ago where a male sex offender transitioned and decided he was a female, decided he was a woman, and demanded that he get put in the female prison, which he was, and then he sexually assaulted women in the prison. So these things matter. And so I just want to spend a couple of minutes just encouraging you with a few thoughts. Okay, can you put the first one up, please? And they're all about love, because honestly, love is the basis for everything we believe, because God is love. But what does love look like in this space? For me, love doesn't look like you are who you feel like you are, because that's a dangerous thing to say over a person. So my encouragement to you now is love your body even when you don't like it. Being a teenager, especially 12 to 15, flip hard. I reckon the hardest time of your life. Definitely where the stupidest things tend to happen. This is why phones in this age. Woo, the stories I could tell you. Okay, but love your body. You are not going through anything I didn't go through or the generation before you didn't go through in terms of your body. This too shall pass. Just hang in there. And there are going to be other times in your life when you don't like your body. I gave birth to twins. They weren't little twins. They were 3.1 kilograms each. I was like a monster. Like, everyone was like, you look abnormal. I was like, well, you carry 2 babies like that. So, you know what? There's times where our bodies are important. Our bodies are very, very important. They are part of our identity. A woman is an adult, female, human. A male is an adult, male human. And being a male, being a female, embrace it. It's part of God, not God's limitation over you, His beautiful design for you. And I think we just got to remember that often, most of the time, the discomfort you feel has nothing to do with your gender. It's just to do with the weirdness of life and the things that are going on. The second thing I want to say is love diversity. So we have a very stereotypical idea of what a male and a female is. And I think part of what's happened is that we've told men that masculinity is toxic. I want to say masculinity is fantastic. We need men. We need good men. You know, I often say this to the boys at Northwood. I'm quite confident in my daughter's decisions and where she's going in her life. My concern is, are they going to be good men for her to marry? We need good men. We need strong men. We need men who embrace their masculinity, not like Andrew Tate, please. Please. That is not, the only reason people are paying him attention is because the real men are scared to stand up. So men, we give you permission to be men, to be masculine. Masculinity is not abusing people, belittling people, controlling people. It's strength, courage, leadership. We need these things. But that looks different in different people. You know, I don't know if you guys know this, but my husband and I lead a church. So I'm actually a pastor's wife. And that was a lot for me to wrap my head around when it happened. Because all the pastors' wives I knew scrapbooked. Guys, whoever invented that thing, I'm sorry. And so I was like, what does a pastor's wife even look like? Like, are you allowed to wear these shoes? I don't know. Like, are you allowed to wear jeans? Are you allowed to not like scrapbooking? But I realized that I didn't not want to be a pastor's wife. I just didn't want to be that kind of pastor's wife. I wanted to be a pastor's wife who could go and teach at a boys' school and talk at youth and hang out with people and just do what I felt who I was. And so we need to stop pigeonholing people into saying that is what a woman looks like, that is what a woman's role is, because there's so much space for us within our God-given male and female identities. And actually, I believe that males and females suppress the worst in each other and bring out the best in each other. Okay, you guys will agree with me. Boys at Northwood on any given day are not always their best selves. Okay? They're scruffy, they're pushing each other, they're like, a little bit like testosterone overload. But then I do this thing whenever I'm able, is I go and volunteer at the Northwood Social. Okay? Because then these boys are a completely different beast. They're less of a beast, actually, and more of a gentleman. Because there are girls there. The hair, like sometimes I have to look at these boys like really carefully to figure out who they are. Am I right? I'm not wrong. They know I'm not wrong. But this is why I love co-ed school, because, you know, we have it all the time. But anyway, I do love all boys schools too. But we bring out, and then the same is true. You get a bunch of girls here, and they're being bitchy, and they're gossiping, and they're like, nah, 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 nah. And you bring a guy, and he's like, hey, girls, what's happening? Suddenly, the whole vibe changes, because there's a guy there who's actually bringing a little bit of like, okay, let's just stop with this, because this is just lame, and let's just go play soccer or do something that's got a little bit more life in it. We bring out the best in each other, and we suppress the worst in each other. And stereotypes really don't help us. I want to just share 2 stories with you in this. The first one is, a little while ago, I met a girl. She was about 18 years old, and she said to me, I've decided to detach from my gender. Disassociate was the word she said. Disassociate from my gender. And I love to talk to people who are on this journey just to see how their minds are working and what they're thinking. And she said, and I said to her, what has caused this? Like, what is your thinking behind it? And she said, and she was a Zulu girl. She was from the Midlands. I was up there. And she said, when I was growing up, my mom was a slave and my dad was the boss. He made the money, he controlled the money. On a Friday, he'd go drinking with his friends. My mom made the food, cleaned the house, raised the kids, and had no rights. I don't want that. But she wasn't rejecting her gender, she was rejecting a gender role. She was rejecting a very toxic gender stereotype. And so we've got to remember, when we feel these things, when we think these things, what are we actually rejecting? And you know what? It's your job as the young generation to reevaluate the roles, to go, wait a minute, this isn't right. This is not what I signed up for. This is what it looks like for me. And then the other thing is that we've got to remember is, I'm going to share the other story just now, is that when we do that, we give people space to be who they want to be. And then the third thing I encourage us all to do, if you can put that up, is to love yourself. Okay, I've spoken about your body, but loving yourself is different. And I feel like loving yourself is giving yourself time, giving yourself space, looking at what are my social media influencers telling me. Because there are so many toxic ones out there for guys and girls. There's this one woman, and I can't remember her name, but she's got this massive following now, and she basically tells girls how to use their body and their sexuality to get guys to buy them stuff, pay for drinks, do stuff. And it's this kind of this thing that we're seeing where women are going, well, men are going to objectify me anyway, so let me take back the power and objectify myself. So we're seeing a lot of those. So when you are online, who's shaping your thoughts? What are you allowing into your world that tells you who you are? You know, I saw this alarming statistic not so long ago that said the average American teenager spends 6 to 9 hours a day on social media and 45 minutes a day with their family. That's not loving yourself. Loving yourself is spending time with these kinds of people face to face, feeding your soul with truth, with people who really care about you. Because I'm sure you know this, but let me just remind you that person at the end of the YouTube video who goes, I love you guys, they don't love you. They love your subscription, but they don't love you. The people who love you are these kinds of people in this room, your family, your friends. So just be so careful about what you're allowing in to your world. And then the other thing is love other people. I heard this thing the other day. I actually heard it on the way here. I'm sure you've heard it. How much is this worth? How much is it worth? Not much, but it's worth 100 rand, right? To us, it's worth a lot. Okay? What's it worth now? 100 rand, okay? And now? Still 100 rand, okay? So every single human being, whatever state they find themselves in, whatever journey they're on, whatever you think of their decisions, is worth everything. Because Jesus died for them. They're worth everything. So you don't have to agree with someone for them to be worth your respect. Respect and love are not about how someone treats you. They're about who you are. Okay, so I love this. Danny Silk says, you don't have to choose compassion or conviction. You can live with both and in both. Okay, and I encourage you, if you are a follower of Christ and you believe that your body matters and your identity comes from your whole self, from creation, from your purpose, live in that. Live proudly and securely in that identity, but then love the people around you. One of my best moments at Northwood so far was last year. I got the privilege of being at the prize giving, the year-end prize giving where the matrics got all of their prizes. Were any of you guys at that? Were you there? Okay. So the guy who got our art and design prize was obsessed with Barbie. Obsessed. He was in matric, phenomenally talented artist, but he drew Barbie. He created Barbie stuff. He designed Barbie stuff. His dream is to work for, is it called Mattel? Mattel. Dream. He had a Barbie pencil case. He had a Barbie thing hanging off his bag. He was obsessed with Barbie. He had a tough time at a big all-boys school, I'll have you know. Okay? And a lot of boys didn't agree with, some of the stuff, but I know that so our head counselor helped him a lot in his journey. And as a thank you to her, he restored all of her Barbies from when she was a child. Their heads were off, their clothes were broken, and he meticulously hand-stitched, restored these Barbies they literally looked like you'd bought them in a shop. He was that talented. So he won the Art and Design Prize at Northwood. And when he got up, carrying his Barbie, and went up to get his prize, those boys exploded in applause. Exploded. The whole place went crazy, and he ran up with his Barbie like this to get his prize. That was not his experience, his whole journey at that school. But at that moment, those boys who thought, had a lot of them, the thing is that about 90% of us have the worldview that men are men and women are women, and these kind of the biblical worldview. But they had a boy who was different, but they celebrated him for his achievements and his uniqueness and who he was as a person. And so I love those moments, and I encourage us, even if we don't agree, just because you disagree with someone's choices or ways of living doesn't mean you don't love them, honor them, and respect them as human beings. And then the last thing I want to say is to love your future self. I say this a lot, but we all have a future self. It's a person who's standing in the distance that we are walking towards. And that person will either look back at our now self and go, thank you for making those good choices, or oh, my hat, you made a mess for me to clean up. And if you can put that picture up, please, of the girl in the station. I love this. This is where I actually got this phrase from. This is from Humans of New York, and she says, I wish I'd partied a little less. People always say be true to yourself, but that's misleading. Because there are two selves. There's the short-term self, and there's the long-term self. And if you're only true to your short-term self, your long-term self slowly decays. You guys live in a culture that says be true to yourself. But what I want to say to you with so much love and so much respect is you don't know who you are yet. You are figuring it out along the way. And what you do now is going to impact the mother, the father, the person that you are, the wife, the husband, the woman, the man that you become one day. And so my encouragement is take a breath and take a moment. Scott Nugent puts it like this. He says, as teenagers, you can't see around corners yet. As you grow, the corners start to straighten out, and you can look down and go, oh, yes. This is why 14-year-olds don't get tattoos. Because we don't know who we are yet. This is why we don't need to make these huge decisions. But the other day, I was talking at a private school, and this 13-year-old girl in the front row, we were talking about digital footprint and making good choices online, and then we obviously got onto the nudes. And she said to me, she literally looked at me straight in the face, and she says, my mother has no right to tell me not to send a nude to my boyfriend. It is my body, it is my phone, it is my life. This is why 13-year-olds shouldn't make life-changing decisions and probably shouldn't have TikTok either. But anyway, the thing is, I just encourage you at this time of your life, teenagers, don't just embrace this time of figuring stuff out, of feeling uncomfortable, having days where, I have a teenage daughter. I always say my son's problems are generally solved with food, sleep, or hockey. Like one of those three will generally solve. Like if they're grumpy, that's generally will solve. But my daughter, it'll be like an hour conversation trying to figure stuff out, and then she'll be crying and happy in like 5 minutes. And I'm like, okay, we're going through stuff, we're figuring ourselves out. But it's important to remember that you guys, your brains, and this is important to remember for all parts of your life, is your brains are growing really, really fast. But the part of your brain that's growing really fast is here. It's called your amygdala. It's responsible for passion, for emotion, for compassion, for love, for all of those big feelings, attraction, sexual attraction, all of those things. Your feelings are very big, and you often do your thinking from here. But your prefrontal cortex, as I said, is only going to be fully developed when you're 26. So it's like you have this car with a massive accelerator and really bad brakes. And you got to know that about yourself in all your decisions on whether you choose to be alone at night with a guy or a girl that you like and your parents aren't home. Not a good idea, because brakes, not so good, okay? And with these things, so we've just got to know that about ourselves and make sure that we factor that in when we are making these decisions. Okay, so I just want to end with one more picture, and you are literally the third group of people I've ever shown this picture to, so be kind. Okay, this is a family photo of mine, okay? That little scruffy person with the filthy shirt and the weird bowl cut, short haircut is me. I know you all thought it was a boy, right? You did. Stop laughing, boys. Don't be mean. Okay, that's my mom in the frilly pink dress with the flicky out 60s, 70s hair. She was like a proper girl. There's my sister. She's wearing smocking. Do you know what smocking is? Like those little dresses with all the flowers and stuff with her long hair. It's my cousin. But that's how I dressed. That was me, okay? It wasn't that I wasn't a girl. It was that I was a different kind of girl. And I was just figuring out the kind of girl that I was. And so my encouragement to you is embrace God's design. God's design is beautiful. Being a man, being a woman, they are fantastic. And within those, discover the man or the woman that God has made you to be. And then at the same time, that song, I've got to download that song that you guys sang, the second one about the window. We need to shine our light into the world. Stand in conviction, stand on God's truth about men and women, male and female, but be loving and kind to those who are around us, whether they think the same or not. And if you take hate for who you are, for your identity, that's okay. Jesus took hate too. But Jesus didn't throw comments on Instagram or TikTok. He just loved people. And he allowed who he was to draw people into his kingdom. And so be yourself, be who God's called you to be, the man, the woman God has called you to be, and be loving and embracing to those around you. I think we're done, unless there's questions.